Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar about outsourcing your help desk in the new work from home era. We're going to talk about how and why to make it right. My name is Alvaro Prieto. I'm the Senior Managing Director and co-founder here at Oxys. I'm also leading the technology practice. Oxys is a 23-year-old consulting and outsourcing firm based here in South Florida in beautiful Fort Lauderdale. And we provide a variety of services, consulting from management consulting, technology consulting services, as well as outsourcing services in the IT space, including help desk and business process outsourcing, among other things that we do. So very excited to be here today. I really appreciate everybody's taking the time this morning to join us. I think we have a wonderful discussion with our panelists, which I will introduce later in the presentation. So before I get going, let me take care of a few housekeeping items. So starting with we're gonna present or push some questions to you throughout the webinar. We appreciate if you take the time to answer these questions as we go along. They're not very difficult, so hopefully they'll be quick and easy. And then I will share the results with you as we go through the presentation. Also, the presentation that we're going to be covering will be emailed to you at the end of the webinar. We also have the recordings available for you to listen to at any time. So if you need to go back and get into any specific slide and what we discussed, that will be there for you. And last but not least, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to make those questions in the question area in the GoToMeeting little space that you have there to answer those questions, or use the chat function as well. So with that said, let me start the presentation. Actually, I had some of our panelists. We have our panelists is one of our customers is VistaJet, and I had to share something with everybody, which I thought it was pretty interesting. Some friends of mine are actually are customers of this wonderful company, and they were actually this morning on an airplane on one of their flights. Yeah, literally, this picture was sent to me 30 minutes ago. These are some golf buddies that are a little obese, but anyway, they're in the way to Chicago this morning. So anyway, so our topic today really is about the help desk, and what we have seen as an organization, it's really how things are changing. I mean, it's amazing that 6 months ago everything seemed to be quite normal, and it's just I think everybody agrees that the world really has changed, and particularly for employees and organizations. But what we're seeing, which was a trend that was happening from years back, as far as the adoption of outsourcing increasing among multiple organizations. Now with this pandemic, what we are seeing in general is an acceleration of a lot of those trends that we were seeing in outsourcing. And now, Gartner here in some of the statistics that they show that they are predicting that 74% of organizations are planning to make the remote work a permanent part of their operating model. All of these type of things we're going to have a tremendous impact in the help desk, being the front end of IT, as I call it, or the face of IT. It's a function that obviously we know very well, but when it's done the wrong way, it really puts a bad taste on everybody's mouth, if you will, from the way the services are being delivered from the IT department. And it does a ripple effect across the whole organization about the services that they're getting from help desk. So help desk is becoming a very important function, and is going to become a very important function, or even more important than it's been as we go through this new operating model. We're also seeing an increase on help desk outsourcing for many years past, and what we wanted to do today is really share with you some of the things that how to make this outsourcing go about the outsourcing in the right way. And this is, coming from lots of our own experience, being 15 years outsourcing in the technology outsourcing business, and really more importantly, hearing from our panelists about their own experience and what they have seen firsthand. So other interesting facts here about what's happening. I mean, like I mentioned, outsourcing was at an all-time high as far as the percentage of the total IT budget that is being outsourced by organizations. But we're predicting that this is going to continue increasing over the years as a second, as an option for organizations to scale their operating models. Also, the outsourcing discussion is pretty much very prevalent today in pretty much every single organization that we talk to. So some of the things that we are seeing as firsthand as far as how it has impacted our own operations. This is just things that we have seen ourselves, and some other things that we have seen also in the market that are fairly well known, is that a lot of the help desk organizations were not really prepared to deal with the extra demand that has come from users working from home. Particularly, users that have been even using their own home equipment and broadband connections that they have at their homes to connect into the into their organizations. A lot of things also from a help desk perspective, the help desk operation itself, for a lot of companies that they have everyone in their agents being, let's say, in-house, they were not really ready to support users from a remote side. So they didn't have perhaps the telephony systems that they needed to connect remotely and manage perhaps the queues, or they didn't even have the service management applications to create their own tickets and manage their workflows in a way that they can access it, from anywhere, anytime. There's a lot of still service management solutions, and we're going to hear from Doron later on CSAID about these type of technologies, how they enable this function to be operated in a more effective way. Other things that we're seeing is as organizations are not working on their own let's say buildings, they're working now from home. Even the agents haven't been able to really get up to date with the knowledge bases that they had, or they were forgot to keep perhaps or maintain up to date. They don't have the body next door to ask him the questions, or the level 2 folks in the help desk to support them right away. So that has created a little bit of an issue also from a support perspective from the help desk. And other things that we are seeing impacting the help desk is really the just not able to have even phone-based support for companies. For example, I don't know if everyone knows about the issues that happen in India, India being one of the countries where there's a heavy outsourcing industry, and a lot of their employees were, you're talking, hundreds of thousands of employees that were obviously, or millions actually, that were sent home. And in India, as opposed to what happened to us in our operation in our operation center in Costa Rica, they didn't have broadband connections at home, so they were not really able to connect and support the global workforce that they're supporting from that country from their own homes. Some of them tried to use even mobile technologies, more prevalent internet access that is used outside of organizations in India. So that caused a massive disruption for companies that they were, getting those services from those type of organizations. Now, on the other hand, for us here at Oxys, we have an operation our delivery operation is in San Jose, Costa Rica. Costa Rica has a wonderful infrastructure from a technology perspective, from broadband connectivity, widely available anywhere. So we never missed a bit, basically, from that operation. I mean, we have close to 400 people there, and we have basically everybody, 100% of the workforce working from home with absolutely no issues. So that has been something that is important to also consider as we get into more of the factors to look at when you're outsourcing. Other things that we've seen as well is with organizations that could not meet their service levels, right? That is more from the provider perspective. So they waiving a lot of the service levels because obviously they didn't have the workforce or the technology or whatever it could be that they was impeding them from offering their services. So they're waiving SLAs across the board. And they are, here at Oxys, we never had that issue. Thank God that we were protected from these no, because we have the connectivity into the internet, so we didn't have to really go that route. But a lot of organizations that didn't have that were not that lucky, and they really are dealing with pretty much best efforts and things like that from a help desk perspective. So the help desk, as you see, in many ways, it wasn't really, a lot of organizations really are not, we're not ready for what we're dealing with. And now organizations that we really have seen a tremendous increase on opportunities, and companies really looking to outsource right now more than ever before. Like I mentioned earlier, this trend is definitely accelerating, and it's going to continue in that way going forward. So with that said, let me start our first polling question of the day, and let me just click here on the right screen. So here's our first polling question. So I'll give you, let's say 20 seconds or so to answer these questions, and we'll share the results with you. All right.
Yeah, so 46% of companies are more open to outsourcing now than before, while 38% have always believed in outsourcing and it's working well for them. And just a minority, 15%, believe in outsourcing, but their current model is not working. So interesting. In general, it seems that the IT audience really, believe in outsourcing more than other audiences, such as finance, and that's normal to see.
Right. Well, that's great. Thank you. This is that's Fabiana from Oxys, our wonderful marketing leader here. So thanks, Fabi, for that. I don't have access to the polling questions here for some reason, but anyways, so I think as far as that trend of outsourcing, I think based on these answers, you can see that there's definitely a way to look at that. And so as you look into outsourcing, I mean, and outsourcing has a lot of bad connotations historically. I mean, I think this has been something from the past. But what I can see about outsourcing is that when it's done right, outsourcing really is not a concept anymore. I mean, obviously, for a lot of companies, they still are, especially mid-sized companies. I'm talking companies between 100 and a billion in annual revenues. They're still in that kind of halfway pregnant way, if you will, not be able to make those decisions. Perhaps they're too small, or but they're not growing, or they're growing, and there's multiple factors here that are involved. But there's a connotation sometimes in outsourcing that is really not perhaps the right thing for the organization, and there's many reasons for that, and we can cover some of these in the next few minutes. But outsourcing really is a proven business model for just a lot of companies. The issue with outsourcing is really, like it says here, is really the execution. So as I mentioned before, we have invited a couple of our customers and one of our technology providers here from CSA Dorondon Youngerwood. So let me start. Joseph, why don't you do a quick introduction? Joseph is the CTO. Joseph Jensen is the CTO for Uniload Aviation. He's based out of Houston, Texas. So Joseph, go ahead. Joseph, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a auto mute function for you. Hey everyone, thank you for letting me join today. My name is Joe Jensen. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Uniload Aviation Solutions. I'm based in Houston, Texas. The company is headquartered in Zurich, Switzerland. And our key business is that we provide maintenance, repair, and overall services for the airline industry for passenger and cargo operations. Our customer portfolio is approximately 45 to 60 large carriers, anyone ranging from, you can see on our website, from we do services for DHL all the way down to some work for Amazon and others. We also coincidentally own the largest air cargo shipping container unit load device fleet, and we afford that as a pooling model to customers in many different formats. So we have a really good global presence, but we are a very small company, and we operate almost like a startup at times. So we just went through a COVID-19 leadership transition, and therefore the company has been transformed a little bit. So we've merged together the technology group, the classic IT group, and then the customer experience group into one. Therefore, we have a technology division, which goal is to improve customer experience and organizational capability and strategic forward thinking in terms of technology and IT strategy. So thanks for having me here today. Hopefully that good.
Thank you, Joseph. Really appreciate that. Yeah, Uniload has been a customer of ours for quite some time. We help them with a carve out from the parent company, and pretty much set them up very much from scratch as far as operating the multiple, zones that they have around the world. So it's been a wonderful experience working with Uniload, and really happy to have Joseph here joining our panel. So let me, so from a presentation perspective, are we back on track? Are we seeing the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific, thank you. So yeah, so just to pick this up, and then one more, one more thing. So yeah, so we have also Doran Youngerwood. Actually, Doran, he's with CSAID. CSAID is one of our key technology partners here at Oxys. Is pretty much the service management platform that we use across the organization. So Doran, why don't you give us a quick introduction of yourself and maybe talk a little bit about CSAID?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the webinar. It's good to be here. So my name is Doran Youngerwood. I'm running the marketing at CSAID. CSAID, for those of you who may not know, we're a global service management provider focusing on the IT service management, like Alvaro talked about. We've been around for around 19 years. Big, strong focus in North America. We support thousands of customers across North America with a strong emphasis on helping IT departments to boost agent productivity, drastically enhancing end user experience, and also really driving value across the organization. And we have a strong focus on automation. Automation goes across everything that we do, especially relevant now during COVID-19. Automation is one of the kind of the flagship features that's really helping support IT departments, of course, subsequently are helping their organizations push through during this interesting period.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Doran. Yeah, and CSAID and a platform like a service management platform, I think we all know, is absolutely key to the successful implementation of a good service desk operation, or any of the IT functions that follow under. It's just not service desk only. It's really more of a platform to obviously support all of the processes that are required to deliver a good service, like the incident management side and change management and config management, and all the different processes that are involved in delivering a good IT services using the IATIL framework. And us, as an organization, we have been an evangelist, if you will, of the IT library, the ITIL framework for almost 20 years now. And we found with CSAID to be one of great platform that basically supports these processes from the get-go. So absolutely key to mature and operate an organization at a high level using best practices. So we'll get into some questions for Doran later on, but thank you, Doran, for the introduction. So continuing with our deck now that is working. Like I mentioned, back to the outsourcing discussion, as companies now are really looking or accelerating their outsourcing endeavors. I mean, I think the execution part is what we want to focus on. I think it's not the why should we outsource or any of those type of things and so on. Well, you have to get through that, of course, but the key to, once that decision is even contemplated, is really look at how the execution of your outsourcing program is going to happen. So we have a few things that, and it starts really with the drivers, right? Typical driver for outsourcing, and it's probably not going to change for a long time, it's always been cost reduction, right? Looking at trying to operate better with less, right? More with less. But it's really not the only driver. And a lot of companies really start having, I see one over and over again, that they focus too much on just the cost aspect of outsourcing. And unfortunately, for a lot of companies, they're really, most of the companies in general, IT is something that they're underspending. I think we all here are probably in the technology field, so we would know that underspending in IT is a common issue for most organizations. It's changing, and the investments in IT are growing as obviously more companies become more digital, and they see that that's a way of growing and operating and competing in today's markets. But cost reduction is definitely one driver that obviously has to be looked at. But other things that are really important is really aligning, these efforts of outsourcing with what the business is really trying to do. And I know it sounds like a broken record for most of you about aligning IT with the business, but it's still a major issue. And a lot of companies that really are looking at outsourcing really failed at the very beginning of those relationships to identify what these drivers are, align those drivers with the executive teams, and then align those drivers with the outsourcer provider, right? So it's very important. And then once you have that alignment, the key there is to start putting in on paper when and how you're going to get there, right? When are you going to realize that these drivers have been achieved, right? So that's very important to understand and really set the right expectations from the get-go. So there's many drivers here that obviously I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's, the ones that really come to mind is really, first is your experience with the outsourcer. You want to go from, perhaps you were dealing with something that wasn't as good of a service. Perhaps it was a little bit of an ad hoc. We typically do, for example, maturity assessments when we start an outsourcing relationship with our customers to see where they are today. And then in most cases, we find that from a maturity perspective, there's this capability maturity model that is used to understand maturity on the process side, a lot of, for in the IT service management business. And then typically most companies are really immature when it comes to how they're operating, right? Which is a driver for them to outsource, because when they see what they need to really do to improve those operations, it could be quite costly and it could take quite a bit of time. So the outsourcing really help speeding that up, but also as they are trying to make and mature those operations, you want to make sure that the users are going to obviously have a much better experience. So understanding what that experience is going to be, what it's going to look like, and how you're going to measure that is obviously very important to determine when you start outsourcing. Other things that obviously you should look at is, how to scale, with your provider, right? I mean, even like I mentioned earlier, uh, no one predicted that this was going to happen, but a good service provider will have strong disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans, and many ways to continue providing their services no matter what happens. So that's really important. I mean, I'm sure when people were outsourcing, thousands of, or if not more, jobs into, let's say, an India operation, they never thought that they were going to be, what happens if they really would be disconnected, or if their agents will have to work from their homes. How would that look like? So now it's going to be obviously an important driver for most companies as they're looking into outsourcing. Another thing that really pops up out of this is real-time reporting, and that's really key. Not only, I used to go back in the 80s, and even today, even in these days, looking into organizations that are running IT, and they just don't have the metrics and the information, the upper management, to really understand really what's going on behind the scenes and how things are being delivered. So being able to have real-time reporting as far as what's happening and provide trends and analytics as far as what is happening in the IT function that is being outsourced is absolutely key to measure and manage the service provider, and also to set the right expectations with the business, right? So couple of so with that, hoping that we're not going to have another issue here, but let's see how it goes with our second polling question of the day. So that's what would be your main driver, right? If for considering outsourcing your help desk today. So we'll give you a few seconds to do that, and then we'll finish with the last slide of the day before we get into the panel. So thanks. Angie.
Yeah, and Alvaro, just so you know, we have Steven now, so I think that we're going to be ready to have a great panel with Steven, Joseph, and Doron all together.
Great. Terrific. So just to my team, I'm not seeing the polling question, so Fabio,
yeah, so the results are actually very interesting, because 56% of the companies, the main driver for outsourcing is freeing up their internal team for higher value activities, and actually just 11% answered cost reduction as the main driver.
Wow.
As to other drivers, they 22% looking at improving service levels, and 11% looking at expanding either coverage hours or. So pretty interesting.
That's a very interesting result, actually. I would not expect that, but and we had multiple drivers that we discussed internally about which ones to put here, and that was the number 4th one here was the one that we were not sure about it, but because there's so many other great drivers as well. But it's very interesting that that's the answer, and actually, it's glad to see that that the focus is not necessarily on cost reduction. Like I mentioned, that was one of the main drivers for outsourcing. So really good news there. So thanks for that. So with that, I know Stephen is online. So Stephen Conway, he is the head of IT and application support for VistaJet. He's actually, I think today you're in Ireland, I believe. So Steve, why don't you give a quick intro before we get going and start the panels here shortly. Stephen?
Hi,
Stephen, are you there?
can hear me? Hi,
yes,
you can hear?
we can hear you. Yes.
Hi. Of course, IT and technical problems, hand in hand.
No worries.
Okay, so look, I'm Stephen Conway. I'm the global head of IT and application support for VistaJet. Just to touch quickly on that. Responsible for the IT service offering across 3 core teams. That's the global IT service desk that sits with Oxys, our internal teams such as IT support and application support. We have around 50 resources based in 7 different countries. And that's a mix, that's a split between our full-time in-house employees, our internal IT department, and our outsourced specialized teams. So our global IT service desk that sit with Oxys. Okay. Just on the back of that, a little bit about VistaJet. We were founded in around 2004, and we revolutionized business aviation. Our global aircraft services offer an unparalleled service to some of the hardest destinations to reach in the world. So we're talking around 1,900 plus different airports in 96% of the countries of the world. Okay, so we have a tailored program offering that allows a user of the service to buy some flight subscription hours, but also an on-demand offering that again allows the access to the same fleets. And the key here is anytime, anywhere. With the integration recently of our Jet Smarter technology, we give users unlimited access to a much wider fleet. And it's true for us to say that we are the world's first and only global aviation company. So that's a little bit about myself. That's where I sit within the organization and VistaJet itself as the market leader for private business aviation. I will let Alvaro jump on now, but we've been working very closely with Oxys now for for well over a year. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a little bit of a surprise for you earlier in the deck, but I know you had some technical issues, so you couldn't see, but I actually had a picture, checking it back to maybe at the end, of my golf buddies going into a golf trip in Chicago
Yes.
in one of your VistaJet today, literally 30 minutes ago. So
Wow.
I missed the trip for the webinar, so no, just kidding. But you know, it was it's great to see the adoption of Exojet, which I know is one of your companies that is based here in Fort Lauderdale, and we're working with them very closely as well. So great to have you in our panel today. Continuing with our deck, just before we move into the panel, I wanted to leave you with some of the key steps really that we have seen ourselves and we follow very closely with our customers as far as outsourcing your help desk. I mean, we talk about the business drivers for outsourcing earlier on, but really, you know, one of the other things that are absolutely essential is really define what the service is going to look like. So the way that we do that, and is a good, I believe is the best practice, and we've been doing this for a long time, is really to clearly define all the services in a service catalog, right? With exceptions, with whatever it is that is important to the organization, but making sure that those services are clearly spelled out. And any specific assumptions or exclusions from the service or RACI or responsibility matrices that need to be put in place that are that they are well documented in your service catalog. Along with that, it comes your service levels, of course, and how things are going to be escalated in case there is an issue with a particular incident or a particular request that is not being fulfilled on the service with the expectations of the services that were laid out in the service levels. So that is another very key step, which is the third step here. And then, you know, the other one that it comes to mind as well for us is really making that decision between a shared model or a dedicated model. In most cases, the shared model works for most organizations. That's kind of the more prevalent kind of service from an IT service perspective, but in other, and there is a specific situations, like we have some customers that you know, they have a very specific team with the specific applications that they need to support with this very unique training that they use. So they just need the resources located in our centers to make sure to deliver their specific services. So there's really not a need to share multiple teams. And what I mean sharing teams, you have your agents that are doing your support, but then you have a team in the back that is supporting the delivery of the service. For example, your quality assurance teams, right? Your workforce management teams, your knowledge management teams, the reporting and analytics teams. And those are teams that typically are shared and supporting the delivery of the service. So that's what we mean with a shared model, as opposed to a dedicated model where you have, let's say, you know, 15 or whatever, 20 people that are dedicated to your account, and that's it, and they work on a very specific schedule during the day. So very different kind of model, but definitely something to consider, especially if you have large help desk operations that are already established. The other thing that is important is really to identify what is the best location for your outsourcing provider, and that's based on the footprint. If you're a global company like Uniload or VistaJet, you know, you definitely need to look into what areas, you know, obviously what hours of operations, which is typically a 24/7 operation. It may be the best place for you. And there's multiple locations around the world. Actually, I have a slide to talk to you to show you some of the key areas or centers that you can see or find around the world where most of the outsourcing business is concentrated on. Before we get to that, the other points, which is here point point number 6 is really looking to, making sure that you're really scoring your criteria correctly, so you can compare apples to apples, right? And making sure you're absolutely clear on what those how you're selecting the provider. So later on, when you're reviewing the decisions that have been made, or if there's changes in the organizations, you can always go back to how things were decided on, right? And then the other thing is, and it kind of goes along with the discussions we had earlier about the cheapest, lowest provider, right? Which there is cheapest and lowest providers, but it is so true, and it's absolutely true in the outsourcing business. You pay what you get for, what you get what you paid for, right? So if you get to a very low cost per ticket situation, you really got to do your homework to understand what is happening behind the scenes. A lot of those type of situations where you have a very low cost ticket or cost per ticket, you get into a lot of issues with service delivery, with a lot of turnover in those organizations, which increases your training costs, for example, and in general, just an inconsistent delivery of services, which is a big problem for when you're trying to increase your the level of support that you're delivering to your own organization. So don't fall into, hey, I'm gonna find the lowest cost per ticket. We typically, when we get into situations like that, we ask a lot of questions, of course, and sometimes we don't even participate, because we know what's going to be, what's going to happen in the future in those kind of relationships, which is all about getting the best bang for the buck, and just cutting everything, as they say, to the bone. And that's not typically a good way to outsource or work with an outsourcing provider, especially if you're outsourcing for the first time, right? If you're already outsourced and you already been down that path and been working with multiple providers in the past in the same function you're outsourcing, then those discussions are a little bit different, because there's a more mature discussion about exactly what to expect and what type of levels of support you're looking for. But when you're outsourcing for the first time, you really need to have a very detailed analysis of the partner you're going to work with, how you're going to measure the success of that relationship, and so on, and the flexibility, obviously, that you need from those partners. So anyway, a few more points here as far as obviously making a good business case, and then really working or understanding how they're going to document your infrastructure, your services, having a knowledge base, being updated all the time, keeping those a focus on reporting, and focusing on a very good transition plan, because that's where you start really having issues to begin with. When you go from being from a people-centric organization that you probably are today if you're not outsourced, to a services-centric organization, the transition of that service is absolutely critical to make sure that it's done extremely well. Also, once again, making sure you know how that transition is going to occur, how you're going to measure that you're done, how you're going to measure that it's successful, and so on. So those are really key things. And last but not least, obviously, once you have all these things covered, you're going to basically trust that process. Make sure you're really committed and communicating to the organization along the way how things are being done from the transition and operations perspective, right? So one thing, just a couple of more things before we jump to the panel. I mentioned some of the areas around the world that are the key locations for outsourcing. We are in the Latin America kind of region, based out of San Jose, Costa Rica, and there's obviously great drivers to pick that location. I'm not going to go into all of them, but it is Costa Rica for us it's been a great place to do business. It's where we find the highest number of language speaking resources in Latin America, and it's just a very stable country with a tremendous infrastructure, as I mentioned before. So these are kind of the primary areas. The most traditional ones is obviously the offshore locations in South and East Asia, and then you have pretty much what we call the nearshore services, which is primarily in Latin America, right? So since we have some issues with the webinar, I'm going to skip to a couple of things here, and we can jump into the panel. But these are a couple of things that I want to leave you with as far as what to look for on your partner, meaning that should have good tool sets, analytics, of course, robust knowledge bases, that they're maintaining that information all the time. They got good quality and security controls, and obviously have good programs to retain their people. At the end, you don't want to have rotation in an organization from an outsourcing provider because there's training costs involved. Not that they will charge you for the training cost, but it could cause an issue on the delivery of your services. And obviously making sure that you have flexible contractual obligations with your partner, and you're not hooked, forever with that relationship, if you will, right? Some things that just to talk about analytics, these are the kind of things that we have done internally to really manage our operations and deliver our services to our customers. And we spend quite a bit of time interfacing and integrating the systems that really are bringing us the data that we need to evaluate what is happening with the tickets, how things are trending, what are the top things that we need to address, how our SLAs are being tracked, and so on, the performance of each of the agents and how they're doing and how they're delivering their services, and multiple different statistics that we have around quality and knowledge management, so on. So very important things to have when you really are working with the outsourcing provider, to make sure that you have true visibility over the numbers. So before we get into the panel, just one last question. So this would be, how would you rate the level of support and service that your organization is getting today? So let's spend a few more seconds there, and then we will start our panel discussion. Okay, Fabi.
Yes, it should be copied up shortly. But yeah, so basically 20% answer excellent, very good 30%, and the majority of it, which is 50%, answer fair. So yeah, it seems like level of satisfaction could be significantly improved.
Improve that, right? And that's, once again, a key thing to make sure that if that is the situation, you always don't want to keep doing what you're doing, what I call a lift and shift. What you want to do is having very specific targets of where you want to get to, and be able and knowing how you're going to measure that you got there. That is absolutely key when you're obviously trying to make any kind of improvements, particularly when you're working with an outsourcing provider for the first time. And this is something that we do with our customers to make sure that we, agree on the acceptance criteria, if you will, for the transition, and obviously for how we're doing operationally across the board. So now we're going to go into our panel discussion. And with that, as I mentioned, we have Stephen, Joseph, Joe, and we also have Doran. So I know we have a little bit of an issue, so I'm going to skip to a couple of questions, and perhaps we can start just getting their perspective as far as what they have seen from the impact to the help desk of working from home. What you've seen, what have you seen the change? What changes have you seen, and what is your organization? How your organization adapting to it? So let me start with Stephen, if you don't mind. Why don't you tell us about the work from home situation at VistaJet?
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so it kind of hit everybody. Early in the year, we had this noise, and there wasn't much going on from a European perspective, and then all of a sudden it hit very hard in March. So we had to look at basically closing down all our offices in our main European cities, which meant pushing out close to 400 or 500 users to work from home. Okay, not an easy thing to do. So during the early days of COVID, we saw a big surge in IT requests and in service. Now, these were outside of the normal issues, outside of your normal standard office corporate issues. What we saw was a surge of the setup of the home office, the internet service provider issue that would plague, everybody. So, for instance, my Wi-Fi works in my kitchen; it's not working in my bathroom.
Right.
So, a range of issues that we wouldn't deal with on a day-to-day basis, and what that caused for both internal ITs and our global service desk that sits with Oxys was a huge spike in calls in those early days, those first few early weeks. I think literally it was the month of April was a huge amount of tickets coming in, because we were dealing with those issues that you wouldn't deal with on a day-to-day basis. 500
Right.
different ISPs. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I think hit hard was the lack of the hands-on IT. Okay, where these guys would feel very disconnected from their IT department, that they couldn't have anybody literally help them. So that's where our remote support became very key. Okay, that's where the service desk had to go the extra mile to increase handling times on a call, for instance. That made sure the service was thorough for the end user. We also looked at the communications, our communications between IT departments, IT teams, including our vendor-based teams, had to improve immensely. We were all scattered throughout the globe, working different time zones. So we had to have that seamless communication, right from the service desk up through to management. And what this helped was for an easier escalation between level 1, 2, and 3, but also for that communication for the end user. So for me personally, the impact on IT was huge, unprecedented, in my time, certainly. But it did help with realigning communication needs between teams. And I think that's the big one we pull from this COVID situation, was communication wherever you sit was key.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great. That's very interesting. I'd like to hear the same question to Joseph. Have you seen, from Uniload's perspective and working from home and outsourcing, having this decision to outsource, how is that working out for you?
I think from the COVID perspective, I think around January we started getting the rumblings of that there was going to be some issues, and we don't have the amount of offices obviously as Stephen does, but we experienced a lot of the similar problems. We have a global operations center in Bangkok, and we have regional centers in Miami and in London Heathrow. And as a result of that, we had a very large mix of laptop, personal electronic devices, and then also the desktop versions for the frontline workers. And so in COVID, we had to very, very quickly transition everyone from work from home. Our ticket levels went up as well. Also had a lot of problems with internet and bandwidth and things like that. And during the process, the weakest link was actually ourselves. Oxys was able to support us through the whole process. I don't think I had anything escalate to me or my predecessor at the time in regards to anything from a service desk or from the support aspect. For us, it was frustrating because there were certain areas that every time it rained, we would have trouble. Every time school would go into session at 9 a.m., the bandwidth, I don't know if the kids were watching Netflix all day or going to school, but they sure killed the internet bandwidth globally.
Yeah.
But overall, we've actually changed our business continuity plan and our disaster recovery plan. But we have a permanent pillar in our disaster recovery, where if it's not COVID, it could be anything else. We could actually go remote probably in less than 24 hours. So it was a really good change for us.
That's great. Thank you. That's great, Stephen. Joseph, thank you so much for that. And Doran, from a technology perspective, I'm sure companies that perhaps did not have the software as a service model, perhaps to do their service management. I don't know if you're seeing changes in companies that are trying to make the adoption to that model as quickly as possible. But love to hear your perspective on how has this impacted your business.
Yeah. So not surprising that when we looked at the data and we saw usage across our 5,000 plus customers, we saw a huge spike over the last 6 months of tickets. Just obviously the IT department is being flooded right now. Again, not surprising. I think one of the main takeaways that I saw, it comes down to 3 things. One, is that those organizations that embraced automation before beginning of the year, before COVID-19 hit, are in a much stronger position now. Because IT departments are on the front line now. They're the ones who are, the heroes of the corporate world. They're supporting their end users, wherever they may be around the world. And it's not an easy task for them. But by using automation, by helping to free up 30% of their time, especially the manual repetitive tasks that they're being faced with on a day-to-day basis, that means that they are free to focus on a more urgent, more complex, more strategic issues and requests that they're being faced with. So automation is critical. I also think self-service is becoming more relevant. Self-service has been talked about for a long time, but we're living in a kind of consumerized age where everyone wants to be able to self-resolve their own issue or their own request. They want more control. And I think self-service is something else that has been leveraged over the past 6 months, big time. I think self-service will continue to be critical going forward to help both the end users to be able to get the information they need, whether it's resetting their own password rather than having to wait for the IT department to do it, which is ridiculous in the year 2020, but also in terms of getting knowledge on how to resolve things, how to find things that I need. I call it kind of a self-service catalog. It's a bit like going to a restaurant and looking at the menu. It gives access to everything there is in the restaurant, and a self-service catalog gives access to the end user for everything that they need, whether it's IT related, it could be HR, it could be managing a vacation request, it could be a facilities, fixing a projector, it could be absolutely anything across the organization. So self-service is something else. And then finally, analytics. And you talked about, Alvaro, SLAs earlier. I think SLAs are being thrown out the window recently, but analytics is something that's really important in terms of measuring your success, especially now, in being able to stay on top of everything going on across your IT department as well as across the organization, being able to identify gaps, which you can only do with real business intelligence and analytics, and also being able to reflect the hard work that the IT department is doing across the rest of the organization. So sharing that with someone, the CFO, for example, and that's really critical.
Yeah, so definitely automation, analytics, and self-help, self-service portals. I totally 100% agree. I mean, we are here at Oxys, we actually have a robotic process automation practice that is the fastest growing I have ever seen of any technology as far as adoption, proof of concept, and business case. It's amazing. So we have multiple webinars on RPA, and we are adopting the RPA technologies into our own IT operations now, and we'll call it hyper automation, really, speeding up the way that we're automating things because it's expected. And if you are looking for an outsourcing provider, absolutely make sure that you are looking for the automation capabilities that those providers can offer you and how they're going to share the benefits with your organization as well. So there's great points then. Thank you, Doran, for that. So I know we have a few more minutes, and I wanted to just to perhaps just get our panelists to give it their last thoughts on outsourcing, what they would recommend to the audience or the folks that are here in the audience looking to outsource. What would you be your recommendation to them as far as going in this journey? So perhaps just a minute each, that would be great, and then we can perhaps have a little bit of time to answer some questions. So let me start with Joseph. Where do you go?
Sure. I don't necessarily call it outsourcing because since the year 2000, when I, let's say, graduated, we've moved as a business community into a partnership type mentality where it's not necessarily outsourcing in my eyes. It's taking someone who's more skilled at something than you are so that we can retain the what I like to say, my employees get to do the cool stuff. We get to do strategy, we get to sell, we get to make stuff happen. But the classical support functions in finance, like accounting, and in HR, like everything else, there's a partnership. So for Unilode in general, we look at Oxys not as an outsourced vendor, but actually as someone supplementing us, not just on the cost side, because it's good for a mid-cap business, but on the fact that they're experts in their class, and we look forward to doing that with other what I call donkey work activities throughout our thing. So we get focused on doing IoT. That's where we're at.
Thank you. So partnering, absolutely, yeah, and that's an overrated terms in a lot of customers. But they talk about partnering, but it really takes two people to partner, right? Not just the outsourcer doing all the work or the customer, dealing with a lot of issues. It really takes. That's where you need that flexibility and that partnership mentality. Thank you for that, Stephen. Your last thoughts on outsourcing or partnering?
Oh, you're on mute, buddy.
Stephen, you there?
Yes, hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can.
This is the glory of a very well-connected Irish mobile network. Anyway, look, it's what you were saying earlier. We had the rain, and lo and behold, it went. Anyway, so look, again, it's to echo what Joseph said. It's I like to instill this one team mentality. Okay, it's not a vendor, it's not an internal team. It's one team with a common goal. Okay, and the common goal is great service delivery and happy end users. Okay, if you're thinking about the outsourced model, you need to make sure that you have your criteria that you require for your business first and foremost. That those set of criteria that your partnership will need to hit. Okay, so for us it was 24/7 offering. It was about having those ready built knowledge bases for level 0 or self-service guides, for instance. Okay, but the key thing for me and a lot of years in IT is the vendor is there, the vendor or the outsourced partner is there to support your business. Okay, but you have to support your vendor. Okay, engagement of your internal teams and the business for the vendor to succeed is also critical. It's critical. It's absolutely crucial. And that's how we work with our service desk based in Oxis. For those guys to succeed on those 2,000 plus calls per month, the internal IT guys need to support them, need to engage, and need there to actually have that partnership and reciprocate the support that's coming across. So don't enter into an outsourcing partnership if it's going to be a them versus us mentality. You both need to succeed and have that common goal and ready to support each other as one team.
I agree. Thank you for that, Stephen. I totally agree with that. Very much appreciate that, because this is what we've been doing, and this is what we've been doing business for 23 years, is really establishing strong partnerships with our customers. And quite honestly, this is the reason that we're still in business, is because we have that mentality, what we call the spirit of our agreements, to be flexible and establish that partnership with our great customers we have, like yourselves. So so we're right on top of the hour. I know we have some questions. What we're going to do, since we ran a little bit of time, we would answer those questions, and we will send you the answers to those questions via email. So once again, I wanted to thank everybody here, Stephen, Joseph, and Doran, for taking the time to be with us today, and more importantly, all of you for taking your time of your day to hear the presentation. And I wanted to thank also our marketing team, Fabiana, Angie, Adri, Ryan. Thank you for all your work, and hopefully we'll see you in another webinar in the future. Fabi, you want something to say?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that we still have some attendees on the line, and since I received some last questions, I don't know if maybe we want to stay for a couple of more minutes or...
I mean, I don't have an issue, but if anyone wants to drop off, feel free to do it, but we can answer the questions right now if you like.
Yeah, because I got a couple of questions about Costa Rica, more directed to Stephen and Joseph, wanting to know how it is to work with Costa Rica, if they actually went to the country, how often do they go to visit the team down there. So I thought that was interesting to hear from.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, look, I could field that one. So it was key for us to actually visit the operations center in Costa Rica. It was a major factor for the decision that was made. And so, yes, I was very lucky enough to travel there. What a fantastic, beautiful country it is. But what really sold it for me was the fact that I could sit down with the agent. I sat at the desk, I had my headset on, I was listening to live calls. And I could really listen to the professionalism that come across. Now, this is professionalism from top to bottom in Oxis. Okay, whether it's dealing with the MD of IT services, whether it's dealing with my global service desk supervisor on a daily basis, or it's dealing with the service desk agent. What we see is that professionalism and that willingness to help is what came across and really sold it for me for Costa Rica. And we looked at vendors based in South Africa, UK, the US, all across the board globally. Okay, to get real good mix. But the standard of the English language proficiency and the technical knowledge, especially geared around IT service management upon ITIL principles and framework. I mean, for a country of Costa Rica, I knew about the football team. That's all I knew about. It was a great football team.
Yeah.
I knew nothing more than about the country, but it was a real extension for me of a real professional English language orientated, very educated workforce. And I think that really helped push it for me.
That's great. Thank you, Stephen, for that. Yeah, that's and I mean, obviously, I agree with you, and I appreciate those words because you know, for us, I mean, we're in the people business, as I call it, smart people, but you know, it's very important to have that kind of professionalism approach to service delivery, to IT services in general, and Costa Rica in general. It's just a wonderful culture, really, to great people, very friendly people. They really love to go the extra mile to make sure they're always learning, always focusing on offering a service the right way to our customers, and it's been a key to our success. So very much appreciate that. Fabi, any other questions?
Yeah, I don't know if Joseph wanted to add something to that, or the other questions that we had was, yeah.
I was going to say, I've been to Costa Rica several times for leisure, but not to visit the center, obviously, because I just recently moved into this position from another position in July. However, I have one key thing to share. One thing that I really like. When I call, let's say, a facility in Mumbai or something, or Chennai, I talk to Sarah or Tom. That's not Sarah or Tom. When I call the folks in Costa Rica, I talk to Pablo, Eduardo, everyone. They use their real names. And that's very important to me. And it sets an expectation for the customers. And they are multilingual. So that I do like that. And I can share that as positive feedback as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we hope that we can actually have you visit us very soon.
Yeah, I think Steven is going to offer one of their jets to come to Costa Rica with Joseph. So we'll pick you up in Houston and we'll make a trip down there.
What are we going to do? Gatwick? Are we going to pick up Gatwick?
That's right.
You're in Ireland, I believe, yes.
Joseph, Steven, actually, he's based out of Malta, believe it or not.
Malta.
Yeah, so I'm based for our flight operations center in Malta, but I'm just actually working from home in Ireland at the moment. But we have a base in London, predominantly our sales and some of our finance house there in Mayfair in London, and we do have a maintenance facility out near Farnborough Airport in the UK. So like we're global, like I said, 96% of the countries have seen a VistaJet, which makes us truly global. I'm afraid I can't get you a go on the jet. I think you know, if I could probably get my commission for that. So
that's great. That's awesome. All right. Any other things, Fabi, you have? Yeah, I don't see the questions, so I'm a little blind here with the questions.
Yeah, we have a couple of more, but I think that we can basically address them privately. One thing, the last one was more about implementation timeline, like a CIO asking what is the typical implementation timeline. You talk a lot about process transition, having a strong process transition approach, but what does that typically look like in months?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, for an organization, let's say up to 500 users, just to put a number in there, the transition, it really depends on what is it that, where they are and where they want to get to. What we look to is to get it to what we call the steady state point. It's about 90 days in general across the board to get the company fully onboarded into outsourcing, meaning you're documenting all the processes, you're setting up all you're training all your agents to support the service. You're really going through implementing the workflows that are required to onboarding, offboarding, creating some of those type of things in play and put those things in place. So it's about 90 days when we start tracking service levels, about 60 days in. And then from there, we go into what we call hypercare, which is about another month. And then we get to what our target is really, it's about 4 months after we start. We should be, delivering the service levels as proposed or are committed into the service, into the agreement. So about 90 days is the typical time frame to do that. Mm-hmm.
I think if I could just add to that, I mean, we're an organization of close to 2,000 end users. Our transition period with our knowledge share and our access to the systems and our workflows, as well as the ticketing system setups and sharing all our information with Oxys to launch the service, took 6 weeks. And that was 6 weeks from the initial sign off of the contract through to launching of the service. We entered the hypercare period for about 2 weeks after that. So entire transition to launch, to roll out, to saying thank you very much took around 8 weeks. And I mean, for an organization with multiple global offices, different time frames, 2,000 end users, crew, which is one of our biggest user bases, was very, very good. I mean, 8 weeks in anything to roll a project out of that size is phenomenal.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, I mean, the reason, and that's one of our fastest onboardings that I remember. I think it was because what you mentioned earlier, there's a true partnership spirit from the very, very beginning. You were very involved. Your organization was very committed. We very committed, of course, and make it happen very, very quickly. And so that was actually something that was done very effectively and worked out really well. I mean, obviously, you being involved so much on this process was extremely helpful, but I think it was I would say it's a record time, right? 8 weeks is tight, but it's definitely doable, and in your case was
it
very
is. It's
successful.
again, it's that engagement, it's that willingness of the business and company to actually engage with the partner. I mean, once you have that down and you have that common goal, then sky's the limit. And that's the main thing.
Great.
And Alvaro, this may be also more for Doron, but in terms of CSAID, they're asking, why did Oxys choose CSAID as the main ITSM platform, and how do you think it's different from the other ones that make that a preferred choice?
Yeah, that would be a long answer to give, but in a nutshell, we found that and we do software selection for companies, ERP systems, and all sorts of things. So we have our selection criteria and our scoring systems and everything else. So we did look into CSAID and every single detail. I mean, obviously we're a service provider, so it was very important for us to have functionality that would match the multi-tenancy requirements that we need to support our customers, the flexibility of the platform to adopt to accommodate the service levels that we have different by customers and different unique things by each of the customers that we serve. So their flexibility was one of the key things that I found very attractive and make to help us make the decision. From a pricing perspective, compared to all the bigger players out there, it's very advantageous as well. So that was another thing, obviously, that it's important from a service provider, because I don't want to go, let's say, and implement something like a service now and pass that cost to my customers, because obviously the cost would be reflected accordingly. So pricing was very important in this decision, to be frank. And the other one was very important is that flexibility that CSAID had, and we've been working very closely with CSAID on making the platform better, making us better using their technology, and it's been a wonderful partnership as well. So that's one thing that I saw. I mean, Doron is in Israel. CSAID is based in Israel, and it feels like you're working with somebody really next door. So they're very responsive to our needs, and we have been able to build a great partnership, and we saw that from the very beginning. We're not just another number in their customer list, and I think that's another thing that made a huge difference for us, and I think that they do the same with every other customer. No?
I think Alvaro, real quick, for an interesting, you dropped the service desk, jargon. And you could look on my LinkedIn about my previous employer. We tried to implement service desk throughout our divisions, and it failed.
ServiceNow.
Yeah, ServiceNow. Sorry, and they're throwing it away. Complete throwaway.
Yeah. I mean, when you buy these big systems, and this is a different discussion, you end up using a small percentage of the total functionality that those platforms really provide. With CSAID, we're using a lot of their functionality, and we know that we could use it, and we know how fast we can get to the point that we would enable those features for us based on the services we provide. But when I look at apples to apples as far as features, functions, and all that with any other provider, they're very much in par with everybody else, so it's just a matter of looking at how you're going to make it happen. So and how much you're going to leverage those platforms. ServiceNow is like the SAP of ERPs, and there's a lot of implications with using something so complex and costly. So yeah, those are key reasons for us to work with CSAID.
Awesome, and I'm gonna leave it up to that, Alvaro, because I know that we already, run 15 minutes
I know
over.
it's been quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
No, but yes, no. So once again, really want to thank everybody for being here this afternoon or evening. In your cases, Steven and Doran. And like I said, we're here to help. If there is any need for us to, if you're interested in talking to us, by all means, you can contact us on the web. You can reply to our invitations to this webinar. We'll be doing other webinars in the future, so you can always look into the oxys.com website. And with that said, we can wrap it up. And thank you again to our panelists, and everybody stay safe. And thank you so much for attending today. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.